Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on Thursday, June 27th. It's also a great pleasure and honor to be joined by the Attorney General Charity Clark in the studio today. Thank you very much, Attorney General, for being with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You've been here several times before, and it's always been fascinating to hear what's going on up in Montpelier and what your office is working on, and we do really appreciate you making the time to be with us again today because, well, I guess as always, there's always stuff going on, and we just saw the legislature conclude a one-day veto override session where, let's see, what, 10 days ago now, oh, my God, time flies, where the legislature overturned, I think it was 6 out of 7 of the governor's vetoes. So, and a couple of those vetoes involved some bills that you were, or your office was quite interested in, and one of them I thought we could start with would be the one involving restorative justice, or the restorative justice program here in the state. That bill, I guess, would involve an expansion of the restorative justice program. And I wondered if, I guess, just to get us going here, could you tell us a little bit about what that would involve, how that would change things?
Sure. So in my office, we have a unit called the Community Justice Unit, which administers 2 restorative justice programs statewide. So there's local nonprofits, there's one in Bennington, and there's probably one in Manchester too, all over. And they handle court diversion and pretrial services. This is a third program that exists. Right now, it's not in our office. It's at the Department of Corrections, and it's called pre-charge. It's for lower level crimes, things like disorderly conduct, at a bar or something like that. And the idea is to divert the charge completely. It never happens, so that it goes right to restorative justice. And for folks who aren't familiar with restorative justice, in essence, restorative justice requires the perpetrator of the harm to take responsibility for it, to say, I did this, and then participate in a restorative process. Often that might look like volunteer community members forming a restorative circle, and there might be a list of things that the person needs to do. So in my example of disorderly conduct at a bar, maybe repairing any damage, apologizing, things like that. So that's kind of the gist of what restorative justice looks like in this concept of the pre-charge program. This bill transfers that program to my office, so it'll be in the community justice with those other restorative justice programs. I've thought for years that that's where it belonged, and I'm really happy that that move is now taking place. It will also expand the program so that it's statewide. There wasn't geographic justice, and now there is. So statewide, this will be available, and it formalizes the program so that there will be a little bit more, substance and guidance for implementation of a program like that.
So what was the governor's objection to it?
Well,
it involved funding, I think.
Yes, he testified against it for a few reasons, but when he wrote his veto message, the only reason he gave was that he didn't feel my office had the capacity this next year for the program, and the reason he cited was the legislature didn't put funding into the budget for this. While funding is certainly needed next year when the program will become effective, so it's not until next year, we had asked for someone so that we could have help standing up the program, getting the transition in place, and doing all the things so we'll be ready to go in July. We have the bandwidth to do that. We will make it happen. It's not ideal. So he was citing that, and I was able to say that's not a cause to sustain the veto. We certainly can handle this. We worked internally to say, is this something we can do? We can make it happen. Not ideal, but it wasn't a reason to sustain the veto, and I'm really glad that the legislature, heeded our call, and they did end up overriding that veto.
Because it would seem like the idea of restorative justice makes a lot of sense at a time when the prisons are overcrowded and more expensive, I suppose, really, to house someone in a jail, as opposed to doing a program like making amends for some sort of wrong and learning from that experience.
Exactly. I mean, especially for a crime like disorderly conduct, this is a lower level crime where there's an opportunity to make amends to the victim in a way that the traditional court system doesn't always provide that kind of, I mean, statistics surveys show that the victim doesn't always feel the healing. And with a restorative circle and a restorative process, that's a key component. Taking responsibility is a key component. And for someone, again, with my bar example, for someone who might have, a trouble with alcohol, well, here's an opportunity to learn about services and to have that be a part of the perpetrator's own journey of healing too. Restorative justice is really effective. What we see in our community justice unit with those programs is that the recidivism rate is just lower. It just works for people who engage in that. And it also engages community members. Sometimes the victim themselves is a part of that restorative justice circle, and sometimes it's sort of like a stand-in for that person if that person doesn't want to participate. So I just really believe in restorative justice for a crime like that, and I'm really pleased that transition will happen, and it will be, really where I think it belongs in our office.
I hadn't realized that wasn't a statewide program. There's one down in Bennington, the Center for Restorative Justice there, but...
Well, they implement a number of programs, and just not every county has the option for pre-charge. They'll have court diversion and pretrial services, but pre-charge hadn't really been formalized. I think it had evolved. So now they're, through this process over the next year, it will be, and then it will be available statewide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly be following that along. So another issue that came up in the veto session involved the bill involving data privacy, and that was the one bill that the legislature was not successful in overturning the governor's veto. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what's in this bill and again, what were some of the objections to it?
Sure. I will say this was a priority issue for me. This is an issue that I ran on. I really believe in data privacy, and I think some people don't realize how important data is to our modern world. The internet is virtually run on our data. Oftentimes we don't pay for websites or apps on our phone. Instead, we pay with our data. So we're not paying money, but we are paying with our data. That data is used either to sell advertising spaces, so like on social media, that's what happens, or the person who's taking our data is selling our data on the third-party data market to data brokers, or they themselves are a data broker. A lot of the internet, and that means modern commerce today, is occurring online, and that does involve our data. As we know in my office, because we have the Consumer Assistance Program that handles reports of scams and complaints like that, identity theft is a huge concern for people, and it also is top of mind for us because we're the office where reports are made about data breaches that occur. So Data Breach Notification Act has our office as the person you report to. We get a data breach notification at least one a day. So we say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So the more data of yours that's out there, especially sensitive data, the more at risk you are to identity theft and just having your privacy violated. So anyway, I could go on and on about data privacy, but let me tell you a little bit about the bill. So the bill had it was a comprehensive bill, but it had a few big components. The first was the concept of data minimization, which has been implemented in now many states. And that is the idea of implementing best practices about data that you keep. It puts the consumer in control of their own data. So if I don't want you to keep my data, I'd like you to delete my data, you have to delete my data, that kind of concept. It also kind of codifies best practices. So for businesses who might not have a great privacy policy, it's a way of saying this is a good privacy policy. You want to minimize the data that you are keeping and holding, because if there is a breach, you don't want to be involved in that. And we just settled with a big company for $3 million who had terrible practices related to data security and had to settle with the state for a lot of money. So that's a big component. The component I'm very excited about too is it deals with sensitive data. Sensitive data is things like your face, your DNA, your fingerprints, or your social security number, data that if it got into the wrong hands could do you harm in some way. And this bill treated data, sensitive data separately from other data. And then the final main component related to children staying safe on social media. And we have sued Meta in a lawsuit. We are investigating TikTok for harms against children on their social media platform. So some of the components of the bill were really informed by our work and what we've learned in our investigation against those cases. So that's the overview of very roughly of what the bill does. I think some of the concerns that I heard were from some of the mail order catalogs here in Vermont who have a lot of consumer data. The bill carved out small businesses. So if you had consumer data for 25,000 consumers or less, fewer consumers, this bill didn't apply to you at all. And then for the mid-size businesses, if you had data for 100,000 consumers, you might be subject to what's called a private right of action. Private right of action is a fancy way of saying the consumer themselves can sue if the law was violated in violation of their privacy. So the bigger businesses could be subject to that, but only for sensitive data. So only for your social security number, sensitive health data, your fingerprints, things like that. So it wouldn't include, public information like your address, things like that. And then it sunsetted after a couple of years, so they were going to see how the private right of action went, whether it created any concerns, or whether the concerns were really realized. So businesses spoke up and they had, expressed their concerns. In the process of passing the bill, those changes were made that I just listed. So there was a lot of protections put in place for small businesses. At the end of the day, the legislature passed, the bill passed out of the House, I think almost unanimously, and the Senate almost unanimously too. It was overwhelming. But when the governor vetoed it, he cited the same concerns about small businesses. And I put out a statement saying, hey, we heard these, and they were all incorporated, and the legislature did a great job. But ultimately, there was some doubts about that, and it was, I'll be honest with you, it was very frustrating for me to watch some of the debate on the Senate floor because I was thinking to myself, that's not even in the bill. So it'll be great to go back in January, have these conversations again and make sure everybody understands and all the voices are heard. And I will say, I think it's really important to hear from children, from parents, from teachers, and from everyday consumers about their data privacy and about social media, because they're in the bill, and I think that their voices are very important.
Well, my understanding is that there was a lot of pushback from the business community, and in fact, right here in the Southwestern Vermont Chamber of Commerce also put out a statement which we got where it said they were very happy that the business community has spoken out, and I'll just quote directly from their statement here: business voices played a crucial role in ensuring an extreme data privacy bill in its current form did not become law. While businesses support comprehensive consumer data privacy legislation, H121, the title of the bill, was rife with provisions that lacked clarity and would have had unintended consequences for businesses, consumers, and the Vermont economy. I take it you don't share that point of view.
I don't. I really appreciated the businesses getting involved in the process, though. I think it was really important, and their concerns were reflected in the bill. So what I have sort of my mindset now is, where in the bill you're talking about? What section? What page? Because I'm not seeing it, but I'm definitely open to having the conversation. And in the coming months, I will be having that conversation because I want to meet with people to say, small businesses are the backbone of the state. I grew up working in a small business, in my family small business. I'm covering my microphone. So it's great that they were a part of the process and made their voices heard, and I think that they were incorporated in the final outcome of the bill, which was great. And we're going to go back and we'll make a better bill, and that's how the process works. So it'll be good to hear from them and from all the other voices. It's our data that's out there, and I think that consumers have a right to control their own data, and that's kind of a fundamental tenet that I have.
Yeah, indeed. I think certainly in this age of the internet, we're all concerned about our data, being controlled. You know
what else, Andrew, I should emphasize? I'm often asked to give keynote speeches about data privacy and things, and something that I always point out about Vermont is we have an ethos of privacy in Vermont. Famous poet Robert Frost, famous Vermonter, said, "Good fences make good neighbors." And that's about privacy.
Right.
I mean, I even joke, like, our state motto, freedom and unity, it's like, everybody support each other, but mind your own business. You know, it's a kind of part of the culture here. And this would really codify that into law so that our modern privacy, which is data privacy, is also kind of steeped in that ethos.
So is this happening a lot, like people's data being stripped away or being compromised in some way? I mean, one hears about things like this, but are there a lot of cases that your office is handling that involves someone's data, like their social security number, for instance, being stolen?
Mm-hmm. Well, we get 5,000 scam reports every year at my office. So yeah, when we're sending out, identity theft packets to help people if they feel their identity has been stolen or is at risk for being stolen because they were scammed or they were the victim of a phishing scam, so that someone's just collecting your data, and they can steal your identity. So I would say for sure frankly, it's kind of the bread and butter of the Consumer Assistance Program. That's all we do. What I have been so fascinated by is the normalization of taking our data and how it feels like every time you turn around, if you read the policy, the privacy policy, which of course I do, I'm always stunned. Like, what do you mean you're going to do whatever you want with my data? That you reserve the right to do whatever you want with my data. It is really interesting just to see how out there it is. And something that I think people don't realize, if they set their social media to public, those are public. So people could take the photo that you posted and do whatever they like with it. There's laws to protect in some respects, but we had filed a lawsuit against a company that screen scraped the internet for photographs, compiled a database using their biometric information on the pictures, so they basically face mapped all the people in the pictures, and they now have 40 billion photographs. So they've face mapped everybody on Earth. And you can give them a picture of someone and say, "Who's this?" And they can scan it and show you the other pictures they have of that person. Pretty unnerving stuff, and people don't realize it. They never consented. Sometimes you might be in the background of a photo. That's the one that really gets me. You're sitting on a bench by the North Shire, and someone takes a picture of the North Shire, and you happen to be there. You don't even realize it, and the next thing you know, you're in this database that you didn't consent to. So I think that we are in an interesting inflection point when it comes to technology and privacy, and we want to make sure that we put in law our values and what's the right balance for us here in Vermont.
We've been hearing a lot about artificial intelligence and the scraping of the internet to get data to train these large language models and whatever else. How concerned should we be about all of that? The deep fake piece and everything. Is that going to be something where your office is going to be getting involved in some cases that may arise out of that?
I unfortunately think that we probably will need to get involved. I was so grateful the legislature answered our plea. We wanted to make sure that Vermont's criminal statute relating to revenge porn included deepfake pornography, non-consensual deepfake pornography. And for viewers who aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, a deepfake is when someone takes a voice or a photograph that's of a real person and tries to use technology to make it look like that person is doing or saying something they're not. And with non-consensual deepfake pornography, I've been following some reporting in the New York Times about this. They called non-consensual deepfake pornography an epidemic among teen girls. And if you're interested in this topic, I encourage you to look up those articles. There was a great podcast that they did as well. And it's really important that our laws are keeping up with the technology and making sure that people are protected. But it's really disturbing because, of course, there's a lot of, even though it might not be you doing or saying that thing, there's a lot of shame, confusion, feeling of your privacy being violated. It's not okay. I always emphasize this because I think it's important. It's rude. Don't do it. It's not only illegal, it's rude. Going back to the election issue, of course, people use deepfakes for all sorts of things, and one of them is to make deepfakes of elected leaders or other leaders trying to manipulate voters. So in the New Hampshire primary in March, is it still in March or was it February? I don't remember. This winter, we'll say. Someone made a deepfake pornography of President Biden's voice, encouraging Democrats not to vote. And it was quickly identified as a deep fake, and the media was great and put out the word, this is not real, this is not President Biden. But really concerning, because you can use your imagination to see how dangerous that could be. And going back to scams, that's another popular place we see deep fakes. Celebrity supposedly selling or giving away Le Creuset or some sort of product, and if you just pay a little money here, you can buy at a discount this pot, this cookware, or whatever the scam might be. But it's not really that celebrity. And we've even seen, there was a case, it wasn't even a scam, I think it was a legitimate company, made a deep fake of Tom Hanks, the actor, and Tom Hanks put out a statement saying, this isn't me, I'm not selling this product, it was a dental product of some sort. And so there's another way that deep fakes are really dangerous, but let me magnify this. What someone like me, who's an expert on the marketplace and consumers and scams, is seeing is the more proliferation of deep fakes and this sense of you don't know what's real on the internet, the more that happens, the less trust consumers are going to have to buy things on the internet. And so much of the marketplace is on the internet. Imagine if there was a destabilizing impact on the online marketplace because consumers didn't have the trust that this was legitimate. And it could happen in the election context as well. But anyway, so it's important that we all kind of understand and become more sophisticated about some of these uses of technology so that we can protect our pocketbooks, our democracy, and our children.
So would this be a situation where you'd want to team up with other attorney generals in other states and come up with a 50-state solution here? I mean, just one that sort of deals with Vermont would probably be kind of pointless, I would think. Are there conversations going on with your counterparts in other states around this?
Yes, but I will say Vermont is small but mighty, and sometimes we can be leaders.
Right.
We can be leaders. We collaborate a lot with our friends in other states, and it's really wonderful to be a part of a community of attorneys general, and we collaborate across partisan lines and on issues where we have common viewpoints. We find ourselves on opposite sides of some issues for sure, but something like social media and data privacy, tobacco, we have a long history of collaborating. The Meta lawsuit that I mentioned, where we sued them over their harms to children on Instagram, 42 other attorneys general besides me joined that effort. And we do joint investigations where we create efficiencies and opportunities for leadership. So I really think that this is going to be a topic probably for the rest of my tenure as Attorney General. As long as I'm Attorney General, this is going to be a topic. It's just, there's so much changing with AI, and there's so many problems, and I think there's almost an ethos of asking for forgiveness instead of permission, and we're the ones, the AGs, are the ones doing the cleanup when that happens.
So when it comes to the elections and the political side of this, this has been an area I've been kind of interested in. How can this be regulated? If someone puts out a video of someone that sounds like President Biden or anybody who's running for office saying something that's just outrageously crazy, but it sounds like their voice and their image is on the video. I mean, how does that get controlled?
It's really tricky. So there's a few ways. One is all of us need to be more savvy and have awareness. So we're educating consumers and voters and children about, to be more sophisticated about identifying when something is real or not. The other is there, of course, because it's America, already there's a market for identifying what a deep fake is. And that's, in fact, there was a product on the marketplace that identified that's a deep fake of Joe Biden's voice. And they're going to continue to do that and get more sophisticated so that they can do not only voices but also videos as well. So they have, they're just incredibly savvy technologically, and so they are developing products like that, which is great. We also need our laws to keep apace, because there's going to be the scammers, and we can deal with them. But I think right now we are dealing with an area where the legitimate companies are also I think violating our privacy in a number of ways. And you read about it in the newspaper, and it's like, well, this is a company I trusted. or they seem like they're legitimate, but actually you find out they're doing something that you would view as unethical. A commonplace that I always think about when I think about unethical behavior is in training AI. And we had Vermont authors whose work was used to train the AI of ChatGPT, and they joined a lawsuit based on a copyright violation. Well, I don't want to use a product that might have violated the copyright of Vermont authors. I want them to be able to make their living, and I want to use a company that's following the law. So I think we're going to keep seeing the tension between new technology and where our laws really are, and whether we need to be developing more laws, because it's always good to remember people are in charge of the country. This is a government for the people, by the people, of the people, not for the big tech, by the big tech, of the big tech. So we're in charge.
Well, let's hope so. In a couple of minutes that we have left, I just wanted to ask you maybe a few other things that your office has been working on. I guess, my understanding anyways, that the judicial system in Vermont, has been struggling over the last couple of years, kind of going back to the start of the pandemic, where case logs built up and trials were delayed, and there was a big backlog of cases. And I just wondered, are you seeing that things beginning to get caught up?
Yes.
4 years later after the start of all of this?
Yes, we have, and it's nice because especially in the criminal context, it's really important to move those cases. But the other thing that I'm sure in many parts of life we're experiencing is this a kind of uniting of what was good about before the pandemic with all the technology and the changes that happened, and also the things that we learned and developed and used during the pandemic. And now we're integrating those practices, and I think the courts are in the same way. We do a lot of hearings now remotely. Well, that's creating a lot of efficiencies. Someone's not getting in a car and driving to a county, to be in court physically. They're able to do it online, and that can create a lot of efficiencies. And so I think we're in a nice place where we're making progress, kind of integrating all of those best practices and also getting back on track with moving the cases through.
And I remember, I think the last time you were here, we talked a bit about how to, I'm not sure what the right word is, deal with domestic violence.
Yeah.
That was a major concern of yours.
Yep.
Are we seeing any improvement there?
I'm so excited to tell you that last week I went to the network. We call it the Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. Everyone calls it the network. And it's literally a network of all of the local, PAVE in Bennington, for example, all the local domestic violence centers and nonprofits. And Senator Leahy and Marcel Leahy got a grant somehow, a lot of money, to create a national training center for workers who help in the space of preventing and dealing with domestic violence. And so I was so excited. I got to go, and Marcel and Senator Leahy were there, and he was so great. He was like, and I thought to myself, if we're going to have a national center, we want a major metropolis like Waterbury, Vermont. And so there we were in Waterbury, and so they're going to be doing, they're literally a national hub to provide trainings, and I'm really excited about that. In January, my office will release our, every other year report on the fatalities related to domestic violence, and that report always has recommendations on what can we be doing differently. And so we'll look to see what's going to be in the report this fall. We'll get a little preview and see if there's any legislative suggestions in there and what else might be in there. So that's always a way to make progress, just to analyze what's happened, have that reckoning, and then think about ways we can do better.
Well, it's a terrible situation, and any improvement we can make there is super important.
Yep.
Well, boy, we could probably talk for another half an hour about all kinds of other issues, but we'll have to leave it there for today. But again, I wanted to thank you, Attorney General Clark, for making the time for coming down our way. And but of course, this involves coming back home, right? Coming back to Manchester. Yep. And it's always good to have one of the locals up there in Montpelier, helping run things.
Well, I represent the North Shire wherever I go, so when I'm in Montpelier or when I'm home here.
All right, that's terrific. Well, thanks to all of you as well for being with us and sharing part of your afternoon with us. Really appreciate your being here. And again, thank you, Attorney General Charity Clark, for being with us. And have a great day, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.